Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. I think you're going to be in for a very interesting conversation today. And without further ado, I turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, my friend, Dr. Barbara Davis Stevens, Dr. Ivan Walks, Ms. Jocelyn Hines, Dr. Lawson, and Simon, and all of you who decided to join us today. I want to go a little bit different direction than we normally go every Sunday, talking about nutrition and talking about biological health needs. I was so upset with the new administration of something they did. When I was 12 years old, I got invited to a hot dog cookout at a player for the Cincinnati Reds in Ohio. And the cookout was in honor of a visiting player. His name was Jackie Robinson. And he was a hero to all of us. And so I had hot dogs with the great Jackie Robinson with the other 12-year-olds in the neighborhood. And the current administration ordered the Pentagon to take down any reference to Jackie Robinson. There seems to have been a plan to take away anything that recognizes the contributions of African or African Americans to the world and to our country. So a big part of health is knowing your numbers and knowing what your people did and what you're capable of. And so in the interest of dealing with our mental health and who we are, I wanted to take a quick review of great African civilizations. And I invite my co-moderators to comment as we go along or ask questions or comment me, but I'll try to do this rather quickly. First slide, Simon. So we know that the Black Health Trust is about empowering Black health. And we deal with not only health disparities, but also trying to not just be equal, but to obtain optimal health. And we think that is very relevant now, especially with our history being attacked. Next slide. So the history of great civilization of Africa is a very relevant and question that's being asked every day. Why are we relevant? We built this country. Next slide. So we know that Africa is a cradle of humanity. The ancestry of all human beings is traced back to Africa, even if you got orange hair and call yourself the President of the United States. History goes back to the Great Rift Valley, which stretches from Ethiopia to Malawi. It's the birthplace of Homo sapiens, which means wise or clever human. It's a crucible of life, and anatomical modern humans emerged from here. Now, we know that there's a saying that people used to use, if you're white, you're right. Well, the white doctor who happened to meet Dr. Leakey discovered from mitochondrial DNA, he was an anthropologist, that confirmed the African origins of life of Homo sapiens on the world, on the earth. Next slide. So Lucy was the first discovered. She's a mother of all humanity. She and her daughters brought our genetics forward. Her descendants spread humanity across the globe. Homo sapiens lived only in Africa until some 80,000 years ago. There was migrations that carried African culture, art, spirituality worldwide. Next slide. So Early artistic expression, and that's important because this dates back over 140,000 years in Africa. We know that cave art preserved, it shows cultural depth many, many years ago. And culture means, and art means that you're not just trying to eat or just survive, but it means that you have time to think and do things that express your cognitive ability. We know that rock art at the time showed that people were swimming and playing in the Sahara. And some 10,000 years ago, Sahara was a lush savanna. Agriculture, major cattle herding was going on, and there was no desert. There was no sand dunes at the time. Next slide. So after the change in climate, there was migration to the Nile Valley. And that climate change is something we're going through now, so we better look out. Early cultural symbols, and I was surprised to see that Afro comb. I know my son is always combing his Afro. I used to have an Afro comb myself, but now Dr. Walks tells me I don't need it. They wore Afros in those days, and they found some of this evidence in the tomb of the Scorpion King in Egypt around 3100 BCE. They found ivory tags that were evidence of the first writing, and this predated the Mesopotamia of Sumeria. Next slide. So this led to the Great Pyramid. We know that writing predated tools for power and organization. And the Great Pyramids of the Pharaoh Khufu around 2600 BCE, they were built over decades with conscript Egyptian labor, not Hebrew slaves. Labor was a form of tax payment. If you got drafted to work on the pyramid, you didn't have to pay taxes. Next slide. So Nubia was south of Egypt, and it was very rich in gold, military, archery skills, and other metals and things. And they had frequent warfare with the Egyptians. And under Tutankhamun I, he conquered Nubia. And the Nubians were ruled by Egypt for over 400 years. That 400 years may sound familiar to some of the stories of what happened to the Hebrews in the Bible. The Nubians later conquered Egypt and founded the 25th dynasty of pharaohs. Next slide. So Queen Amani, or Amani Renas, was a Nubian queen. She's a warlike queen, and she was an intellect of that time, and she was a leader in politics and military strategy. And she was a patron of the cultural and spiritual sciences at that time. Next slide. So Rome, during this period, was the greatest power on earth, sort of like the United States is now. So they defeated Egypt in 30 BCE. The queen of Kush resisted Augustus Caesar and fought him to a standstill. She was a one-eyed warrior queen, and she fought him to a standstill and then negotiated a broker of peace that preserved Kushite independence. They didn't get attacked or anymore or ruled by the Romans. Next slide. But the greatest of these was the Songhai Empire. It was founded in 1464 out of the ruins of the Mali Empire. So there's an empire even before the Songhai Empire. It was the largest indigenous empire in Africa. It covered over 540 square miles. Now, if you look at those numbers, that's between the amount of miles of the state of Texas and a little bit less than the square miles of Alaska. So it's a huge area. They controlled trade across the Sahara Desert. They had gold, salt, culture, exchange. They controlled the Indian Ocean, etc. It's a center of learning in Timbuktu and Gao. Next slide. There was also the Bantu migration. Bantu means y'all folks, us folks. They had iron smelting, which began about 1800 BC in Nigeria and Central Africa. The migration spread agriculture, language, and technology. And these furnaces that they did iron smelting was long before they were able to do iron smelting in Europe at all. This established the third age of Kush. Next slide. So the birthplace of civilization we know is in Africa. They had art, they had music. The ancient Egyptians, Nubians, and Saharans, their cultures shaped the whole globe. Africa is central to humanity's intellect and spiritual heritage. Next slide. So we know that Africa is the true birthplace of civilization. Humanities, writing technology, all these flourish here. African civilization shaped the modern world long before Europe's rise. Next slide. So great scientific achievements. Africa is the cradle of humanity and civilization. There's a long history of intellectual, scientific, and cultural attributions. They influence global science and human progress, including philosophy as well. From the ancient star charts to modern innovations. Next slide. So there was something called the Great Zimbabwe, and this was between the 11th and the 15th century. There was a big trading empire in southern Africa. It had massive stone architecture. They didn't use any mortar, just like the Egyptians didn't for the pyramids. The engineering skill and astronomical alignments and structures was noted. It was an economic hub across the Indian Ocean. And we know that these star charts in their caves were accurate. Next slide. So they, from the Nile Valley in the 19th century, European officials claimed that anybody could have built this but the blacks. It had to be done by the Arabs or the Phoenicians. But we know that it was discovered that this was actually done by the blacks of Africa. And some writings on this show that when Rhodesia was founded, which is the country that the Great Zimbabwe exists in, that this was done by ancient Africans at that time. But the Rhodesians were trying to claim that blacks didn't have the intellect to do that. Bull. We know that modern archaeology does confirm that Africans, particularly the Shona tribe, which is the dominant tribe in Zimbabwe, built these without fail. Next slide. So there's something in the Bible called the Hamitic hypothesis, and it's something of a misreading of the Bible. And it's stated somewhere in the 6th chapter of Genesis that there's a curse on Ham because he found his father Noah naked and whatever that meant. And that his son, who was known as his son was colonial, and his son would be cursed and be the servant of his two brothers, Noah's other two sons. This is not correct, incorrect. But it gave white people, especially these, what they call the people in these southern churches, what do they call them? Dr. Neighbor Stevens or Dr. Walk?
I don't think you want me to answer that, but I guess what you are trying to ascertain is the Southern Baptist.
Yes. But they gave them cover to say that Negroes or blacks should be servants of whites. Next slide.
It wasn't just the Southern Baptist, by the way.
All of them. The word I'm missing right now.
Yeah.
Intellectual. Imhotep was in 27th century BC. He's a physician, an architect, and engineer. He wrote the first recorded medical text and anatomical knowledge. I remember one story I read about him that they talked about Hippocrates being the father of medicine. That's not true. 5,000 years before Hippocrates, there was Imhotep. So the way Hippocrates diagnosed diabetes was to stick his finger in somebody's urine or pee and taste it and see if it was sweet. And that was his way to diagnose diabetes. But Imhotep said, I'm not doing that. He had him pee in the sand, and if ants came to it and bugs came to it, you had diabetes. That's the way he did it. He wouldn't put no urine in his mouth. So he also was the father of herbal medicine. Tradition influenced modern pharmacology. There was the Eber Papyrus and those sayings that were written in that time. And Nubia and both Ethiopia uh, were famous for metallurgy, medicine, and spiritual sciences. Next slide. So we know that medical science is people are trying to erase what blacks have done in medicine. Curricula that omit African pioneers, for example, Imhotep and modern black innovators. I always am sure to say every week that Dr. Walks was the head of public health for the city of Washington, D.C. I won't let people forget that. He's a serious person. I want to let people want to know that Dr. Barbara Davis Stevens was the chief of pediatrics at Meharry. Know that the head of family practice for the state of Maryland was Dr. Hines, that the head of the American psychiatric, Black Psychiatrist of America was Dr. William Lawson. We have greatness right in this room. We know that funding of research is biased, and we know that topic choice is very important. And we've had the current president defunding research done by blacks and about blacks. Who gets chosen to give keynote lectures is often weighed to reinforce visibility gap. Do you think everything being done is done by people who are not black? Next slide. So in the colonial and modern Africa, we know that Nelson Mandela, who was a trained attorney, he believed in justice and social transformation. And when he came to office, he did not slaughter the whites as they had done the black. Also, a personal friend of mine is Dr. Robert Mugabe, who was the intellectual leader of Zimbabwe's independence and their first president, and happened to be honored years ago to be sent by Dr. Gus Gill and Dr. Al Cannon to be the personal physician of Robert Mugabe and his wife, Sally Mugabe, to start dialysis in the country of Zimbabwe. Next slide. So as far as African American scientific pioneers, we know that George Washington Carver dealt with sustainable farming, agricultural science, and we know he found a million ways to work with the soybean. Dr. Percy Julian, who was one of the board of directors at Howard University, when Barbara's uncle was the CEO there, President Neighbor. He was a chemist. He discovered the works of cortisone. He developed steroids, glaucoma drugs, and developed what became SmithKline and French, and also developed what's now known as birth control pills. We know Frederick Douglass, who's an abolitionist, and talked about scientific empowerment as well. Next slide. In America, there are certain innovators. We know that Onesimus, and we know that through Dr. Williams and his lecture on history of medicine, was an African-born slave who introduced vaccination, even though Jenner was later given credit for vaccination, but he taught this to his master, who exposed Jenner to that. There was Daniel Hale Williams, who was the first open heart surgeon in Chicago, but in the United States. And we all know about Charles R. Drew, who invented blood banking, and that the school, Charles R. Drew School of Medicine and Science, is named after it. We also know about Katherine Johnson, who worked for NASA, the mathematics person who pioneered space exploration, and she did it by hand, not with all the computers that we have now. Next slide. Contemporary leaders, such as Montague Cobb, MD, who was my professor of anatomy at Howard, but he was a cultural anthropologist and a brilliant man, also a past president of the National Medical Association, and one of the people responsible for Medicare, we know. There's Patricia Bath, who trained at Harlem Hospital in Columbia, who's the inventor of LASIK eye surgery. And she also was a faculty at UCLA with Dr. Williams. And our own Dr. Richard Allen Williams, who wrote the textbook of Black-related disease, and they're taking that out too. And even though the first time I was able to publish, I had a chapter in that book. So I'm very disturbed about it. And we know about Dr. Kezmesia Corbett, PhD, who developed the mRNA virus vaccine that helped not eradicate, but tear down what's going on with COVID-19. And we also have had as a guest on this show, Dr. Georges Benjamin, who is president of the American Public Health Association. Next slide. So there's some key concepts. We know that scientific racism, especially in the 18th and 20th century, was a pseudoscience. It was used to rank human groups and justify a hierarchy which didn't include blacks. Know there's epistemic injustice, wrongful credibility. They decided that blacks didn't know or had less credibility in what they were speaking about. Then there's racial capitalism and capital accumulation historically intertwined with racial domination. And everything was Eurocentric. If you're white, you're right. If you're black, get back. We know that they wanted to center everything around Europe, and that was a measure of whether something is credible or not. Next slide. There's certain blind spots and influential voices. We know that in the 1770s, David Hume penned a footnote asserting that blacks were inferior and lacked arts and science. There was Kant's rebuke that influenced later thoughts in science by White and taxonomy, and said there was a difference in human races. We know that race is not a real biological term. It's a sociological term used to denigrate black people. And we know that the claims help naturalize Europeans primary in curricula, museum, and research. That's why a certain president is trying to take facts out of the Smithsonian. Next slide. So follow the incentives, wealth and labor empire, transatlantic slavery, and colonial extraction. It required some moral cover. They had to have an excuse. The story that Africans lack civilization and intellect, and we know that's clearly not true. We know that Eric Williams' thesis, Capitalism and Slavery. We know that profits from the slave was well intertwined with the industrial capitalism of the United States. When the colonial administrators were rewarded scholarships and conquest and was supported by tutelage. All this narrative was about Eurocentric wealth and smartness. Next slide. So takeaways from what we've talked about, that Africa is a foundation of human science, not Europe. African Americans are the continuation of the tradition under oppression. Contributions across astronomy, medicine, chemistry, agriculture, and politics. We know that the ancient Dogon tribe was able to have star charts long before they had telescopes. And some people say, well, maybe some aliens landed and taught them. My theory is maybe they were the aliens that got stranded here by God to establish what's going on the earth, but that's my personal thing. We know that we need to inspire, looking at our history, future generations. Next slide. So historical denials of African intellect were not random. They aligned with economic and imperial interests and were laundered through elite knowledge systems. Contemporary anti-DA policies echoes older legitimizing frames that operates in new legal terrain. Leaders can advance excellence and equity together with lawful and data-driven strategies. Next slide. There's a number of references. Just put those so they'll be on the recording time, and there's two more slides after this one. And I thank you, and I welcome any comments, questions, or thoughts. Dr. Neighbor-Stevens.
Thank you, Dr. Maxey. As a lover of the history of science, Um, what you have provided is invaluable. And it is an example of what I believe is what we need to do. Now, this is not saying that what is happening today is correct or proper or right, but given the nature of what we're dealing with now, I have become a fairly vocal advocate of us taking back the job of teaching our youth and the younger generations because they are not going to hear the story anywhere else. So it's going to be incumbent upon those of us who have the opportunity to provide what the younger generations need to go ahead and do it. And I would take that a step further. It's not just history that we need to teach them. We're probably going to have to assume, and I don't know how, I got a couple of ideas, but we're going to probably have to assume a more direct delivery of healthcare in our community through the institutions that we control, those few that we control, namely, and the biggest one being the Black churches.
Mhm.
This may be a time where we're going to have to be involved in a lot of self-help in all of those areas.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Ivan Walks.
So, Dr. Maxey, thank you for keeping me riled up today. Um, I think what's really important for us is to stay riled up because things continue to be interestingly presented. Um, there is a friend of mine that has the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, and on Tuesday morning I'll be getting up at 4:30 a.m. so I can go out there in my doctor outfit and stand with other men as we welcome these boys back to school. We need to make sure that there's a clear pathway between where they're starting and where some of us are moving. So this telling our story, we have to be in charge of our story. Another comment I'll make is over the weekend I watched Spike Lee's recent look back at Hurricane Katrina. It was 20 years ago this past week that Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And it bothered me a lot because I ran the New Orleans Marathon the year before Katrina. And then I went back as part of the federal response to Katrina. And I was just amazed at the places I ran through, how different they looked. And watching Spike Lee's documentary, it's called Katrina, Come Hell and High Water. And it's just recently dropped on Netflix several days ago. The injustice, the mistelling of stories that happened 20 years ago with the ongoing injustice and mistelling of stories, it's awful. And combined with what you talked about, Dr. Maxey, with how the current administration is doing things, if we aren't paying attention to what's going on, then shame on us. Because when someone says when they're trying to get confirmed for Senate, well, I will not keep anybody from getting vaccines, but not only now are you stopping the research to develop vaccines, but you are actually putting things in place that make sure people can't have access to vaccines in certain states. We have to continue to tell our story. It is a story of being mistreated, misjudged, lied to. And so I
And about.
appreciate you doing that. I'm sorry, Dr. Maxey.
Lied to and about.
Yes, that was you playing the music for me to get off the stage. Okay,
No,
I
no.
will get off the stage, but I am particularly um worried about who tells our story and what that means for the young people coming after us.
Interesting. Dr. Hines.
I agree with everything that's been said. I happened to take my kids and my niece to the National African American History Museum this weekend, and I realized that there is a significant difference between the environment as far as the ease with which Black history and things like that that they are exposed to is very different now than how it was when I was growing up. Like when I was growing up, there was Roots, there was Shaka Zulu, there was all kinds of things that were like a whole family experience, right? The images of slavery and slave ships and the whip, like they were just there, right? And I absolutely credit my parents with the intentional efforts that they made, that they took to make sure that we were aware of, the first Black senators and congresspeople and who's Ida B. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois, all of those kinds of things. But what was struck me, so my kids are 12, 10, and my 9-year-old niece. They had not seen any of those images before. They knew words, they knew stories, right? But they had not seen any of those images. And they were overwhelmed, and reasonably so, right? With all of a sudden, I have to say, very well done. It was my first time there. Very well done museum, but um, I had to remember that so much of that was just around. It was part of the discourse. It was in Jet Magazine and Ebony Magazine, and we were getting those things. They were on the coffee table, all that kinds of stuff. And times are different now.
Mm.
Um, and again, it's funny because they came in talking about, oh yeah, no, we know, oh, we know, right? And again, it's different when you put visuals and in some cases voices and faces and stuff to facts. And then reminding them, like, your grandfather was, a teenager when that happened, or having my son look at Emmett Till and then be shocked to see, wait, he looks like me, like that's my age, like he looked like me, like all of those things. So I absolutely think that there is an intentionality that we, and I mean across generations, right? Because I can speak to things in a different way than my mom or my dad can speak to certain things. And I will also say there are very much some things that they could relate to. They could relate to George Floyd being to Black Lives Matter what Emmett Till was to the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Like they could make some of those connections.
Yeah.
They could see the connection between stereotypes and of Black people and then stereotypes of immigrants, right? Like they are ripe for explanations. They are ripe for understanding the root causes of, like, what's behind that. Um, but yes, intentionality has to be there.
Thank you. Is Dr. Lawson on?
Yeah, I really want to thank you for taking it back and recognizing the negative intentionality that's existed even in terms of anthropology. Just to remind folks that the Rhodesian story, the Egyptian, and others trying to show that clear evidence of early technological advancements by African civilizations were often bent over backwards, trying to attribute to white folks and white colonization. The development of immunization, for instance, goes way back, and part of it is also in terms of our understanding of the anthropological record. There's this whole idea that for about 500,000 years or so, we had modern brains and modern bodies, but Homo sapiens didn't do anything. But it wasn't that. It was only that the Western world was able to begin to make sense out of the technology that they said, wow, this is what Homo sapiens did, blah, blah, blah. Now there's a big thing of Neanderthals, which lived in areas that were held by a lot of West European folks. When in fact, we're now finding that our technology goes way back. The other point, though, I'm glad you brought up, and all of you brought up the role that we need to play. Something I've been fighting for decades is the failure of our own folks in terms of recognize the importance of scientific achievement. Thus, I can find kids who can tell you every baseball player, every football player, and so forth, but can't name a scientist. Right now, I and several others are in a struggle with the African American Museum because there's nothing in there about the contributions of African Americans to mental health. As Dr. Walks is well aware, the first African American psychiatrist was, we call them Alzheimer's plaques, but the real work was done by Dr. Fuller, who was in that lab doing the work. But there's no mention, nothing about that. Recently, my colleague, Dr. Carson, that was formerly with Otsuka, was recently stepped down as North American president. The Japanese had a special museum dedicated to him because of his work in helping to develop some of our more effective antipsychotic medications. They also, you didn't mention the work that was done in terms of the discovery of Viagra. So there's a number of important inventions and discoveries that's been made. We are not emphasizing these contributions in all things. I've always complained about the NAACP special program recognition. Rarely do they recognize the role of medicine and science. In addition, and I can go on for a number of organizations that we have. I was involved, we mentioned the church, but I've been struggling with numerous churches in terms of the failure of the churches to recognize or emphasize the importance that discoveries we've made in terms of mental health and healthcare, and their constant reference to white contributors, but not to African American contributors. So I think we got some work to do, but we need to start at home, looking at the institutions that we have existing, educate them, because I found that many of the people in the leadership positions that make these contributions simply don't know. And also, and by the way, I just want to have to mention that I was also the medical director for the state of Tennessee in terms of mental health, and not just black psychiatrists, but it's another issue. And also that we have a number of people who have made significant political healthcare roles in terms of our community that we really need to emphasize. So
Okay.
keep up the work. I think this program is a start, but unfortunately, I think you're just scratching the surface. And you also got to, I wouldn't call it resistance. I call it, the other term is willful ignorance. That we need to recognize that if we're going to get folks in terms of our young people, in terms of healthcare, in terms of science and others, we need to let them know that we have had people, many of them are still alive in our lifetime, who are making significant contributions in terms of discoveries that's meaningful for healthcare.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. I originally had a 50-slide presentation. I had to cut down to 20 something. So I had to It couldn't go on forever. So many of us have done things. Is there anything in the chat, Dr. Neighbor Stevens? Any questions or comments, or anybody want to open the mic?
We have a hand up. Dr. Gibson wants to say something.
Okay. Can you open his mic, Simon? In fact, open all the mics if anybody wants to talk. Dr. Gibson?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts to enlighten.
We can barely hear you, Dr. Gibson.
Better?
Nope.
Okay. How about that?
Nope.
No. Dr. Gibson, you're in your palatial estate. Can you move to a smaller room so you're closer to the microphone?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No.
No.
Oh, well,
Are you close to your mic?
I am.
Turn up your sound.
I did.
Okay, go ahead. We'll try to hear it. Go ahead.
Anyway, I have two links that I put in the chat. I would like to direct the attention of everyone to those links in the chat. They direct you to the African American Museum and also to an educator site that I think is excellent because it directs folks to resources that I think we have to use, as Dr. Neighbor Stevens said, we have to educate ourselves. And we have technology that enables us to do that if we use and leverage search engines to do so. That's it.
Well, thank you very much. I like that palatial estate that Dr. Walk says you have. We hear the echoes coming off the walls. Any other comments or questions? I'd like people to comment. Any of my co-moderators want to?
There's some other comments in the chat, Dr. Maxey, other about a Sterling K. Brown produced series on Hulu that folks may want to take a look at, and also referencing Dr. Charles Finch, who is a professor emeritus at international medicine at the Morehouse School of Medicine. I have and then someone asking about the slides, and Dr. Neighbor Stevens putting in there about the fact that these programs we do are available on YouTube, and then Dr. Lawson putting his website in the chat. There's something I think we can do in addition to making sure that folks understand that everything wasn't invented by people that don't look like us, that Elvis Presley didn't invent the the music that he did. There's a term called whitewashing, and everything there's an attempt, especially in the media, to whitewash things, and we have to be very careful about what we see. And to go back to Dr. Hines' comment earlier about taking her children and niece to the Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., taking our children places as opposed to sending them places, I think is very important, because then we can be a part of the conversations that they have. We can be a part of helping with, I guess, honing the questions that they have. So I just think there's an opportunity for us to really get more involved in the kind of information, the quality of information, and the guiding we do of young people going forward. And the last comment I'll make, well, it won't be my last. I'll have another comment. But anyway, the next comment I'll make before I stop talking this time is that I think we have to be very clear about what this means. I can get somebody to memorize all of the names and the dates and when we did great stuff, but what's the relevance of that to me as a young person growing up, being a child in 2025? What good does it do me to know that a person that looked like me did this wonderful stuff. So I think we have to be very, very intentional. That word was used earlier about how we tie what we're teaching to the opportunities that we are protecting, preserving, and developing in our community for our young people.
I think that's very important. The relevance of what we talked about is not just a liturgy of names and accomplishments, but it's saying you should be on this level too. You can be on this. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. I recall when I was in high school that my counselor wouldn't let me take the merit scholarship test. She said you can be a carpenter or something. If it weren't for my parents telling me I could do anything I wanted, I could have stopped way back then. We don't want people putting artificial blocks in front of
Right.
us. Another comment that Dr. Hines made about the hero of Shaka Zulu, and I was looking up information, and of course, information that you get off of Wikipedia is slanted. And he was one of the greatest military technicians there ever was. And except for the machine guns, he would have whooped the British. But they said he was brilliant, but he was crazy. I don't know if he was crazy or not, but they always, what do they call it, a backhand talk, as
Right.
opposed to give him the credit who he was, is a military genius. And I happened to be in Africa for the first time, sent there by a psychiatrist, actually, a black psychiatrist named Al Cannon. You probably know him, Dr. Lawson.
Yeah.
And Dr. Cannon, he was an assistant or the advisor to Mugabe. And he invited me there to establish a renal program. But before I got off the plane, I was stopped by CIA agents, two of them. And they took me to meet Mossad agents, and they wanted me to broker millions of dollars worth of medical equipment to Mugabe so that he could stop the bloodshed from happening in South Africa and take the diamonds from Zimbabwe to Tel Aviv to be cut. So everything is not what it seems. But I know the code, you don't want to double cross Africans. They will definitely cut your head off. You're not right. So I said, no, I'm a doctor. That's all I'm here for. Not brokering, not helping Israel, not helping anybody. I'm here to help people with renal failure. That's it. So
Yeah. Let me also mention one other point that we've been very nice about it, and that is that so many of our contributions to healthcare are being weaponized to be used against us. The example, of course, is immunizations. We helped to develop it, and yet too many times I hear too many folks in our community say we shouldn't use immunization because it's a white folks thing. Same thing with psychotropic medication. Same battle I had in terms of dealing with developing stimulant medication to treat attentional deficit disorder. Same issues in terms of use of intellectual testing and whether or not it's a attempt to try to control Black folks. So there's a number of contributions we've made to the healthcare. There's a concerted effort to try to turn that against us and to have our own folks try to restrict some of the use of these developments, even though they can really bring about some benefits to our community.
Dr. Gibson has his hand up again.
go ahead, Dr. Gibson.
Thank you. I apologize for the technology hiccups earlier. I really, really think it's very important for us to leverage that technology that we have that enables us to go all over the planet, even outside the planet. And we can use the conventional search engines that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. And we can also use search engines like startpage.com, which is a meta search engine that searches the rest of the Bing, Yahoo, Dogpile, and all the rest. If we leverage this kind of easy to access technology, we can go all over the place and examine ideas and history and facts that we wouldn't be able to, even in our lifetime, ever visit them all personally. So I suggest leverage the meta search engines and other tools and, surf the internet there's a lot of misinformation, but there's also a lot of good information there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Coming up in the next week or two, we got a wonderful speaker who's going to challenge some of the things that we've talked about. Her name is Dr. Dua Hassan, and she recently had an article published in something called MedPage. And she talks about how using race in medicine as opposed to fact can be harmful as well. So it'll be interesting to hear what she has to say. Many of you may have read it. So she's going to lead a discussion for us that day. I think many of her points are extremely valid. So we're almost at the top of the hour. Let's have final comments. Dr. Lawson first, and then Dr. Hines, Walks, and Neighbor Stevens.
Just want to note that I'm hoping my book will show that a lot of what we're seeing, I went back to slavery, but you did a great job of showing that this kind of belief that we contributed nothing to our society and to the world has been persisting for a long time. It is an active process. We can say do a few things now. We tried to do stuff in the 70s when we actually had black dolls and so forth. But unless we have recognized that this is an active process that we must continue to fight for, that any gains we make now will be quickly lost in a generation or so.
Thank you. Dr. Hines.
I think I want to just kind of take Dr. Lawson's message and go forward a little bit with it too, right? In the active process. If I look back on how I grew up, I don't think it was intentional, but it seems like, you learned all this information about, all these great people and inventors and things that happened and all these first, and then it just kind of stopped, right? Because it was all focused on historical figures, not necessarily on anything that was going on in the present day. And especially as I find myself consciously thinking about the challenge of, I got to tell you all the stuff, I got to figure out a way to get all the stuff I know, plus all the stuff that has since happened and is still going on into these little brains, right? It is equally as important to make sure that not just our young people, but as a community, we know the ways that we are still contributing, how we are still breaking through, making new in connections and contributions to our communities locally. And I think some of it has to just be as simple as speak up, right? There's not a lot, we're not necessarily talking about some of the things that we're doing. And when people are saying, we find ourselves in the spaces where people are saying some of these, half truths, right? We'll just go with that, half truths. We have to speak on it, right? We have to bring our experience and knowledge to bear, not just informal, at the church talk and at the meeting, but just at the kitchen table or at, the family reunion or wherever. I think that that's important too, because oftentimes you don't find out till people died all the wonderful things that they had been doing with their lives. And you're like, all this time I was sitting next to such and such and they were all of these things. I had no idea. That was just Uncle Booby to me. And that shouldn't be the case. We're doing too many things for us not to know what we're doing.
Thank you so much.
Amen. So there's a comment in the chat about us connecting with folks who are not famous, but who are doing amazing things in our communities. And that, I think, is a part of what Dr. Hines was talking about. You don't have to win a Nobel Prize or an NAACP prize or an Image Award or what have you to really contribute to your family and to your community and to carry on a legacy of service and to really pour into that next generation. So I want all of us to do what Dr. Hines just talked about, carrying it forward, not letting it stop with whoever did something really important 20 years ago, but maybe there's somebody doing something that's really local and meaningful 20 minutes ago that we need to acknowledge and make sure that we're letting people know that our community continues to make significant strides, continues to do things that are absolute. One example, the work that Dr. Lawson is doing now with some of the opioid challenges that exist in our communities, that's stuff we need to know about today, that's going forward today. So I just whatever it is we talk about, we doing more stuff. we got to make sure that we don't get weary in well doing. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Doesn't it?
So I want to thank Dr. Maxey for giving me a promotion for my role when I was at Meharry. I am very happy and really enjoyed the opportunity of being head of pediatric education in the Department of Pediatrics, but I was not the chair.
Was you president of the university too?
No, nor was I the president of the university.
I thought she was the governor of the state.
I wish I were. Now that's one I want to take on. I want to, in all seriousness, I'm going to state the obvious, which is you don't know what you don't know. And the reason I'm bringing that up in the context of what we've been talking about today is that if you don't know and you tend to believe everything you hear on social media, you have no reason to question what you're hearing. And so, on top of all of the other good reasons that we've talked about, we have got to arm our communities so that they can defend themselves from all of the insults they are receiving, from misinformation to direct actions that are detrimental to them, so that they can defend themselves. So there's no way at this time we can walk away from the challenge of retaking the responsibility and ownership of educating and empowering our community.
I think that is so important. As my final comment, I think what Dr. Neighbor Stevens, not only educating, but empowering, sponsoring to help young people get educated and get knowledge. It's very important, I think, to make sure your children and your community knows that you're proud of them and that they have a lot of access to the future. I recall a news report of a cabinet meeting that Donald Trump had a week or so ago, where a whole cabinet meeting, which went on several hours, was about people praising him, about how great he was and how he deserved a Nobel Prize for whatever, I don't know. But that means they're feeling a deficit. They feel inferior. They're trying to catch up. They're trying to serve his narcissism. But I do believe that we ought to give people flowers now while they're living, that we love, make sure we inspire our young people, our old people. We should recognize people for helping our community. Again, they don't have to be famous. One of the things that I enjoy most, every year I get to go to NMA and get to walk among the living legends there and see them in the elevators and in the hallways and break bread with them. So it's very important that we keep as they call it, a stiff upper lip, make sure we take care of our own destiny and dynasty, and keep those kids coming behind us and go higher and higher. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Thank you, Simon, for helping us. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good day, everyone.